Nigel, can you put this in perspective? What does this mean to the United Kingdom, and particularly in fighting this pandemic? Because Boris Johnson's government at first really had the attitude of having kind of the herd immunity, just let it rip. Can you put all this in perspective for us?
Yes. I mean, when this became an issue, and let's be honest about it, we were much slower as a country to wake up to it than many others. Boris listened to a couple of scientific advisors who said we should go down the herd immunity route. And I was absolutely furious about it because I realised it would mean standing aside and just letting 500,000 people die without lifting a finger. So commentators like myself and Piers Morgan were screaming loudly. They then did a 180 on this and we got the lockdown. But to be honest with you, I mean, let's just make one point here. I'm being critical of government policy. I'm not trying to kick Boris Johnson when he's down, but we have completely failed on the testing regime, without which, of course, you're fighting a war without any knowledge, without any data or any information. And okay, we've had this lockdown now in place for almost 3 weeks. But what's been really shocking, Steve, over the last few days, including at 5 p.m. this evening, UK time, was Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said, yes, the Prime Minister is in hospital, but he's still in charge of the government and running the country. And then we find out, an hour or two later, he's in intensive care. So at no point have the government been honest with us about just how unwell Boris Johnson is.
Look, you said on your show, you have the most popular show on London broadcast company, LBC. You said today, I think at 3 o'clock London time, that you believe Boris Johnson already had pneumonia. Did you and the Queen know something in advance? Was this a gut feel of you? Or why did you state that like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? And I want did the Queen know something in advance and that's why she addressed the nation? Because of the 3 times she's addressed the nation before, 2 of those were for major deaths in the royal family.
Well, I mean, I knew that last week Boris had visited St Thomas's Hospital in London to go and have a chat and have some tests. So I realised since then that the situation was much more serious than we were really being told. Look, you do not go into hospital needing oxygen treatment with COVID-19 unless you've got a pneumonic problem. So, yes, I was speculating a bit on that on my radio show, but hey, that's proved to be right. Now, as for the Queen, we could overinterpret the timing of what the Queen had to say. There was never any doubt in my mind that at some point she would speak to the nation. She was giving a message to the country. Please be sensible. Please take this seriously. Please be good-humoured, which I rather liked, because in a crisis we need to have maybe a slightly black sense of humour. Whether her comments were aimed at the cabinet, I think is more difficult to interpret. But just a quick thought on the Queen's broadcast. Raheem mentioned the fact that this is only the 4th broadcast in her 68 years on the throne. Do you know, Steve, when her first broadcast to the nation was? It was in 1940. 80 years on from her first broadcast, she's broadcasting to the nation. And all I can say in this crisis is thank God for the Queen.
Nigel, who is kind of confusing to us because your parliamentary system is very different than ours. As tonight, who's in actual charge of the British government during one of the biggest crises in the country's history?
So the nominee is Dominic Raab, who is the Foreign Secretary. He is now the acting Prime Minister, and he's there because Boris, has said that he should be there. We don't have an elected president. We don't really have an elected Prime Minister. The Prime Minister heads a party that wins a general election, but it's not a vote directly to be Prime Minister. And, we've seen in the last few years, Prime Ministers removed mid-term, a new Prime Minister voted for just by the MPs of that party without involving the public. So, we have a few peculiarities, I think, in our system.
Last question, Nigel. If you had some constructive criticism or observations for the British government of what actions you think they ought to take, given this kind of credibility problem they've had over the last 24 hours, what would it be?
Start telling the truth. Stop lying to us and telling us that mass testing is on the way, that home kits are about to come to us when we find our testing levels are down near those of Iran. And when our Prime Minister is gravely ill, don't stand up and tell the nation he's still in charge and everything's fine. Tell the truth, even if some of what we have to hear in the next few weeks is grim and unpleasant. Be straight with the British people, and they will respect you for it.
Nigel, how can people get you on social media? Can you Twitter handle, how they get access to your radio show?
Yeah. At Nigel_Farage. They can hook up with me there on Twitter. And I'm doing, just as you started with these broadcasts, I'm doing LBC. I'm also doing 4 or 5 times a week. I'm doing broadcasts on Facebook, on YouTube. So if they hook up with me on Twitter, they can follow my daily commentary on what's going on here. And, I was one of the first people, Steve, to call out this herd immunity strategy. We put a lot of pressure on Boris Johnson. Thank goodness he U-turned. But on a personal level, Boris is not a bad guy. Despite his Eton and Oxford background, he did back Brexit. And all of us, regardless of politics, tonight need to pray for him, because I've been told from people who work inside that hospital, Steve, that he is really very, very unwell. So he needs our prayers.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much for joining us. You're one of the greatest men in world politics.
We will make America great again.